Hey, what's up, guys? Coach Mac, Play Fast Football. Today I'm going to talk about the resurgence of OT or GT counter, which is basically your counter scheme using the guard and the tackle as the puller. And I'm going to talk to you about why I think you're starting to see teams use it more. I'm going to talk to you first about what traditionally the last few years, or 10 or so years, maybe 15 years, what you've seen a little bit more of, and then I'm going to talk to you about why I think people are going back to GT or OT counter. All right, so in the last probably 10, 15 years with power spread football teams, what you've seen is you've seen a lot of OF counter plays where it's been a offside guard pulling and kicking and using a sniffer as the wrap player. So in a formation such as this, that was two back. All right, what you would get is you'd get a situation where, all right, you'd get a gap hinge from the tackle, you'd get a center that would block back on the front side, you had a down gap scheme. All right, you'd get a guard that would pull and kick, and you'd get the sniffer that would pull and wrap, all right, into the counter play. So, in my opinion, a lot of teams were using the sniffer because he was more athletic. I think a lot of teams probably found themselves maybe in a little bit of an issue where they didn't like tackles that were pulling. Maybe they found themselves in a situation where they didn't want to have an uncontrolled backside edge player, so the gap hinge by the tackle on a 5 technique or a B-gap player hinging and making the corner longer was something that they wanted to do to protect that backside edge, depending on the type of football team that they were. So you saw a lot of OF counter stuff. It married well with power game. You just kind of switched responsibilities to where, you know, on the power game, the sniffer was front side as a kick out player, the backside guard was the wrap player. As soon as you went to any type of counter game, now you had a guard as a kick player and you had the sniffer as the wrap player. So it was interchangeable with guard and sniffer in their roles with who was kicking and who was wrapping in a gap scheme world, married nicely together, just to have your gap schemes and a kick wrap player, and it married into just interchanging the roles of those two players. And a lot of teams still do it. There's nothing wrong with it. A lot of teams that are power spread teams still use it that way. So I'm not saying that it's gone away or it's disappeared. But what I'm going to talk about today is the GT or the OT counter and why I think you're seeing it more. All right, and the first reason, in my opinion, that I think you're seeing it more is I think a lot of power spread teams that were using sniffer personnel, all right, or that, you know, that fullback that's tight to the line of scrimmage. It could be a Y off. All right, it could be a Y off, even though he's not in that Y off alignment. He could be a tight end body type like Penn State uses with the Jasecki kid. And he could be your multiple player that could be a tight end, but he could also line up at fullback, that hybrid tight end fullback body type. So it could be what you classify as 11 personnel, it could be what you classify as 20 personnel, but we're talking about a guy that is in the core, he's in the box, he's in a position to block gap schemes. He's not in a tight end wing type Y off, okay? So when I say Y off, I don't necessarily mean Y off in that wing position, all right? I mean, all right, that could possibly be the tight end as your sniffer, but we're talking about it today purely as a two-back theory. All right, so I think with the resurgence of the GT counter or the OT counter, again, this is purely my opinion as a power spread guy and as a guy who watches a lot of college football games or studies them on film just to see what people are doing, how and why they're doing it. This is my opinion on why you're starting to see it. All right, a lot of power spread teams, when they started to self-scout, realized that a lot of their runs go where the sniffer goes. So if they're a split zone team, sniffer goes back. If they're a split zone insert or a split zone trap or wham team like we like to use, sniffer goes back. And a lot of times, a lot of defenses were versus true 20 personnel sniffer teams, a lot of times they were making all their fits off of the sniffer, and they felt like they were gaining extra bodies in the fit back towards where the sniffer was going. 2 or 3 years ago when TCU played Ole Miss in, I believe it was the Peach Bowl, and they bottled them up pretty good after the game, Gary Patterson said that they felt like they had a pretty good tell based on where that sniffer was aligned. They had a bunch of defensive line movements based on where that sniffer was aligned, and obviously it worked for them. They bottled up Ole Miss pretty well, and he said that that was a big tendency for them. So I think what teams have started to realize is that sniffer becomes a tendency in the power spread offense, so you're trying to find ways to break that tendency up. All right, so I think, in my opinion, why you're starting to see more OT counter or GT counter is because you can use it as a read theory, all right, in two-back or one-back jet or a toss theory. You can use it as a read theory with the quarterback now because you're not gap hinging the backside 5 technique. You can unchain the backside 5 technique, and now you can use it as a read scheme. And in 20 personnel, all right, very simply, now what you can do, all right, in 20 personnel is you can take the sniffer and you can arc release him front side to be an escort player for whoever the second component of the read play or the outside component of the read play is going to be. So, all right, in this system right here, with it down gapped and it pull kick, pull wrap, all right, if the tailback enters on this side of the counter play, now your quarterback can read the 5 technique, much like zone read or any other option theories where we can read the 5 technique and your quarterback can now become the second component or the outside portion of the run if you have a mobile athletic quarterback. And now what happens is you've got an extra blocker to the front side, okay? You've got yourself an extra blocker to the front side now to take care of the possible scrape exchange or backers that are running. And now you've also got contradictory flow for the defense. These linebackers, depending on what their keys are, they're getting alerts or they're getting flashes behind the center. All right, that spot right behind the center, they're seeing opposite colored jerseys going away, all right, from the side that they think they are getting their key to. All right, so now you're getting contradictory movement where you're getting a sniffer out to the front side, all right, and then you are getting pullers going back the other way. So it's kind of a constraint flow play depending on how teams want to read things, all right, and it's almost like a old school false key pull in a way. If you know teams are keying off the sniffer, this becomes almost like a false pull type play, all right, with a read component to where you're influencing the defense to fit towards the sniffer, but you're trying to get the counter play to go back, all right, towards the weak side or away from the side that you're influencing the fit to the sniffer. Now, obviously, against an 8-man front or teams that like to roll down, all right, this becomes a little bit of an issue now because you get yourself a potential unblocked player. I've only got it drawn up that way for argument's sake, just to discuss the topic. I've only got it drawn up that way. You could draw it up the other way and run the counter back to the Twins to where now you don't have to worry about that apex player who's usually not part of the fit. You can keep him out there with your slot receiver. All right, you could same side the tailback. All right, and if that 8th guy in the box, all these offenses have answers. They're all good. They know what they're doing. So now you could keep the sniffer on the 5 technique, and now you could same side the tailback on the counter play, and you could RPO off the counter play, and you could get the glance look to the 8th guy in the box. Everybody has answers, and they're all ready to handle all those things. So when you watch college teams play, they're going to have answers. If you watch the Oklahoma game tonight, you're going to see GT counter. I'm going to guess, based on all the games I've watched Oklahoma play, you're going to get GT counter or OT counter, I would say anywhere from 6 to 12 times tonight, based on the game plan, based on what they like, based on how Clemson plays it. Okay, so you're going to get that version. In every game I've watched, Oklahoma has run that version of that play with some slight nuances and wrinkles. All right, I've watched Oklahoma base the front side and put the guard and the tackle up underneath of base blocks on the same play. So they've got some wrinkles to it to protect it. They've got some nice RPOs off it and some really good things they do. But Oklahoma is also probably the best offensive line in the country. And I think when you're running GT, you need to be a very good offensive line team. If you wanted to live in maybe a spread world, okay, if you wanted to live in a spread world, now you've got, the kind of front side bash theories with reads going away to where now you can get in a jet sweep world. to where you get yourself in a situation to where now you can get full flow jet sweep coming here, and now you can get yourself in a world where you've got jet sweep coming here, read the 5 technique with quarterback counter going the other way. All right, so now you can get it as a constraint play or a package play with a jet sweep combined with a quarterback counter going the other way. All right, I've seen teams get into 2-back and do it to where they stack the backs here. I've seen teams do it to where they arc release the sniffer front side, toss release him, shuffle the quarterback to the toss. If the end squeezes, he tosses. If the end widens, he runs the count. So you can draw the play up several different ways to get the constraint that you want. If it's GT, you're probably reading the 5 technique unless the sniffer replaces for the 5 technique, which you will see that also. I've seen Oklahoma do that. That's old school counter rules where somebody, whether it's wing T, pro I, somebody replaces the puller so that that person can't chase it down. Back in the days where you weren't in the shotgun and you didn't read the 5 techniques. If you're in a position to read the 5 technique, you don't have to replace him with anybody because he's either going to chase the inside veer releases and squeeze, or he's going to widen and play the action of the outside run. There's no need to replace him. You would only replace him in a true under center theory, possibly where you couldn't read him because you were taking a snap from under center, or potentially in an RPO world where you wanted to block the box, so you had to block the end because you don't want to read him. You want to read a second level player. All right, so I think it's a versatile scheme. I think it's a very multiple scheme. I think you could change how you do it and make it a read scheme. You could read it with a jet. You could read it with a toss. You could read it with a tailback. You can read it multiple ways. You can formation and shift your way into and out of it. All right, so that the defense doesn't get you by formation to how you like to set things or how you are going to run the play from certain formations. All right, so I think the scheme itself obviously has natural versatility, which is great for a scheme. It incorporates itself into read game, which if you're going to be a power spread team or a spread football team or an option football team, obviously you want most of your schemes to incorporate into read game. So I think it carries a lot of versatility there, and I think it could be RPO'd like anything else. To where you block the box and you figure out you're not going to read that end, so you better zip them or block them somehow and get yourself into an RPO world. It fits nicely with quarterback runs if you spread teams out and you can run some GT stuff or OT stuff, and you could either have a one-back sniffer that replaces, or maybe you can stand up and look to bubble screens out of empty or something else, and if the 5 technique crashes, you do something with the ball. There's multiple things that you can do out of it, so I think the scheme has a lot of versatility. I think the drawback to me is you got to have a guard and a tackle that can play ball, number one. I think you have to have athletic tackles that can move and run, and obviously college teams have a lot of those players. All right, but as far as a packaged read play combined with another outside run, my opinion on this is I like my packaged run plays that are outside runs to attack the point of attack that is affecting the read player. Okay, and here's why. All right, when you run, let's just say you're running the toss counter play with the Q, and you're running toss front side, but you're running Q counter to the backside. All right, the end that you are reading, all right, is on the front side of the toss play here. All right, but the point of attack of the counter play is actually back on this side here. All right, so the counter is a backside point of attack play. So what happens is you have a 5 technique on the backside that sees nothing but a down block, and if you play good football teams, what's going to happen is this 5 technique is going to squeeze and get in there and spill. All right, so if you have the guards that can handle the spill by getting it logged and keeping it either at the line or turning it back into the line of scrimmage so that the puller doesn't have to vary his path to get the ball out where it needs to go, all right, then I think that's fine as a football play. In my experience, with most of the time I've run into spill teams, with the exception of 1 or 2 years. 1 year I had a Division I offensive lineman that was 6'3", 315 pounds, and he played football at the University of Kentucky. He was a great player. I ran counter whenever I wanted to because that 5 technique wasn't going to wrong arm. He wasn't going to do anything. He was going to get either mauled into the line of scrimmage if he wrong armed, and we were going to get a short corner, or if he was an up the field or stand up player, he was going to get kicked and knocked into next week. That's why when you have Division I linemen and you have 3 or 4 of them, I think you can run whatever you want because you just maul every scheme out there. So the 1 year that we had a Division I offensive lineman, I've only had, in 20 years of coaching, I've only had 1 true Division I offensive lineman. And the year that I had that 1 true Division I offensive lineman, we ran for 370 yards a game and did exactly what we wanted to. So I can only imagine what it's like to live in a world of teams that have 3 and 4 Division I offensive linemen, because at that point you can probably run any scheme you want to, because it doesn't matter whether they wrong arm spill, it doesn't matter. You just maul everything that goes on in front of you. So that was a great year to play football because every play I wanted to run I had at my fingertips because we could block it all. All right, he could drive and I would run power behind him on double teams because him and another player would put the 3 technique into everybody's lap in the back row. I could base block with him and he could handle a 3 technique on his own. And then when he pulled on counter, he just road graded everything in his way. So football was kind of easy that year. You know, we went 9-1. We lost in the first round of the playoffs, but scored 28 points and had 400 yards of offense in that game. Just didn't stop the other team on defense. So football was fun when you had a Division I lineman that could maul and do all those things. In my experience, the other 17 or 18 years of coaching high school football, if that guard is not a dominant player and the wrong arm kind of stalemates him or actually knocks him back into the other puller, I don't think it's as good of a play. Okay, so you've got your constricted or your constraint on backers, so you've got guys where you've got toss coming, and again, if this was 2 back, you would see more of probably that look. So you've got the toss look coming here with a slot player and a sniffer out in front, so you can equate numbers on the toss play. So if you get the ball kicked to your tailback, you're in great shape. You also have a constraint for these linebackers to run because behind the center, they get an alert of color going away. All right, so there's an alert to them that, wait a minute, flow is going this way, but 2 300-pounders are going the other way. What do? Do I rock back? Do I keep running? All right, so it's a great play as far as the flow and constraining the flow on the defense. All right, but I like it better when I replace the read. If he is a player that goes wide, I like front side runs better because now I feel like I've used the technique of the end against him. He can't spill anything on me because if he spilled anything on me, the ball would go out here. On the backside with this 5 technique, he can do whatever he wants on the backside because he's not constrained. There's nothing on him with the ball going to the perimeter, so when he sees down block, he's just going to spill. Now, I realize at the front side end on down blocks, all right, so let me just draw up, not to confuse anybody, let me just draw up like a power toss read. So if we were in this set right here and we were going to run power toss read, okay, if we were going to run power toss read out of that set there, all right, what now happens is we get the double there working back, the back block there, gap hinge there. Now what happens is we arc this, okay, we power toss this and shuffle. Now if this 5 technique squeezes to wrong arm, now we've got the ball going to the perimeter. Now, I realize that that's not the 5 technique's job to keep the ball from going to perimeter. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is if the 5 technique decided not to squeeze and he decided to go up the field, now I'm running the football through a naturally created lane without having to block the 5 technique. When I run the counter version, I've read this 5 technique here, but I physically have to block and win, whether it be lobbed and crushed into the line in a short corner or kicked out. I have to win a block on a 5 technique that isn't being read. When I read the 5, I don't have to win by blocking him, which is essentially option football rules. So, although it's a great play, I'm not saying it's a bad play, all right? I think that the front side constraint plays when you're reading the 5 and replacing him with the football, to me, are better plays than they are going back the other way. Now, as far as, again, if you're talking about flow and constraint, then obviously pullers going one way with the football going the other way is an extremely good football play. There is no doubt about it in my mind. If I was running that play, I would like the ball to get out to the perimeter with these guys either rocking back or slowing down their fits because of the pullers. That would be ideal in my world. I wouldn't want the counter, all right, in the way I want to play. I really necessarily wouldn't be drawing that play up to get the counter going back because I don't know how I'm going to handle that on the backside. I don't know if we're going to win that or not. In my experience with the teams I've had against the teams I've played, we lose that battle a bunch. So I'd rather live in a world where I don't block a guy and I win based on what that player does. All right, but in general, I think, if you go back to whether it's Joe Gibbs in the NFL with the Redskins, counter tray football, whether it's one back or two back, counter tray football has always been a great play. It's always been a standard. Go back to wing T football or single wing football. There's always been counter with pullers, gaining guys to the front side, trying to get the defense outnumbered on the front side by walling backside guys off, and you add guys to the front side. It's all good football. It's all great offensive football. I think you're going to see it in today's bowl games, especially the Oklahoma game. I think you're going to see it a bunch. All right, so if you're watching that game, look for OT or GT counter and then look for the different ways that Oklahoma and Baker Mayfield and Lincoln Riley run their constraints off the GT counter, because like any other play, you have to have plays that protect your plays. So I guarantee you they have 6, 7 other wrinkles or 4 or 5 other wrinkles to protect the OT counter. All right, I hope this helps you guys. I hope it helps you understand a little bit about where the game has kind of moved from the OF counter that people still use to the OT counter that people are now using more, that you're seeing more of. All right, and in my opinion, I think it's because of a tendency breaker with the sniffer, and I think it's also because of a read game with the dynamic quarterbacks that you're starting to see. All right, first video of the new year. It's January 1st. I hope you guys had a great New Year's Eve. I hope you have a phenomenal 2018. I'm excited about a lot of the things that I've got going on in 2018 and things that I'd like to do with the website and the PlayFast football brand that I've created over the last 5 years. So in the next couple months, let's be looking for some new things coming out. And as always, guys, remember, you don't play well until you play fast. I'll see you next time.